this informal meeting of the Ministers of the Environment and Energy in these important discussions. Now, during this first session, the Energy Minister, along with Commissioner Sinkevičius and with others, have had an important meeting looking at protection of the environment, and we have managed this morning to share our impressions as to how to improve an integrated vision of environment and sectoral policies. Now, this is a very topical debate. It's something which is very much part of the debate around the second heat wave at the moment in our country. And some of the places which have been hotter than 40, 41 degrees, and in the Balearics, in many cases, 35 degrees Celsius. So I think it's extremely important for the Ministers of the Environment, along with the Commissioner, to get this message across again, that we should not take any steps back in policies on the Green Deal, which has been identified as the main task of this Commission. This Commission has been affected by turbulent years. It's gone through turbulent years, like many of our governments, and that's why it's very important that Europe makes progress, its citizens move forward, and will do that by reconciling prosperity and well-being of our citizens with the limits imposed on us by environmental needs. So this morning we held a meeting on how to strengthen policy, integrated vision on water, soil and biodiversity and forests. We've looked at this in terms of preparedness and adapting to climate change. And that's what underlies our commitments, the firm commitment that this generation must have. The reason for this is because a fragmented vision of water, climate and soil and biodiversity has not always worked well. We've lost out in quality of our soils, and this has made it difficult to move forward in agriculture. And that, in turn, makes it difficult to make progress in food security and social progress. We'll have an opportunity today also to discuss some progress made in protection of oceans and looking at plastic waste. And then finally, we're going to be looking at how we can have proper social and environmental guarantees integrated into the development of renewables across our country, so that each member state can share examples of successes that they've had and share some of the problems that they've had integrating these elements. So it's a particularly important council. The main goal is to look at how different approaches, different economic and sectoral approaches, and different environmental approaches are taken into account to provide a consistent view across the board, or approach across the board. I think it's an excellent thing that we have the Commissioner with us today. Over the next few days, we're going to be having an important vote in the European Parliament plenary, and that is a vote when it's very important indeed for this message of conservation and restoration of ecosystems, this message to come out as one of the main ideas focusing on the Green Deal and prosperity and well-being in Europe. Commissioner, please.
Thank you very much, and of course, welcome everybody, and thank you for your interest. And it's my great pleasure to be here today. This morning had a very important debate, and I would like to personally thank Vice President Teresa Ribera for putting on the table the important questions on how to break silos to ensure the success of environmental policies. And we cannot afford failing in our endeavor to bring our economy and society back into balance with the natural environment. And we cannot afford failing society. We cannot afford it economically. We cannot afford it socially. We cannot afford it as policymakers, and we cannot afford it as a parents or as a responsible citizen. And last week, the world has experienced the hottest days in Earth's history on record. This is unfortunately a record that we will keep breaking again and again. So everything what we discuss here with ministers has a crucial role to play. Crucial role to reverse these trends and build Europe's future resilient and secure. So this morning it was a deep dive into a thought-provoking document presented by the presidency on the integrated management of soil, water, forests and biodiversity. The Commission fully endorses the proposed holistic approach, the policy making that encompasses economic, social and environmental aspects. And in fact, this is the approach proposed by the Green Deal, our blueprint to sustainably meet the EU's climate objectives with milestones and goals 2030 and then of course 2050. And when we talk about holistic approach, it is by looking at nature that we can tap the greatest source of inspiration and knowledge. And this is why in so many of our initiatives, be it on circular economy or nature restoration or the latest proposal on soil, we look at how nature does things best and advocate nature-based solutions. We do it not only here in Europe, we do it globally. So this morning provided a first opportunity to present to ministers the Commission new proposal for a soil monitoring and resilience law that came out last Wednesday. So this is another good example of the nexus approach described by the presidency, working across sectors to achieve sustainable solutions. Soil is essential for all life on Earth and biodiversity. Healthy soils, first of all, provide us with food security and help protect us against the dangerous effects of climate change, including floods, droughts and wildfires. And yet, astonishing 60% of EU soils are currently unhealthy. And the new soil law aims to fix this with a comprehensive soil monitoring framework that will assess data on the state of soil across all EU member states and will make sustainable soils management the norm and decontaminate polluted soils. This is one of the many initiatives that we deploy to boost Europe's resilience. As Vice President already mentioned, tomorrow at the European Parliament we will also be debating our proposal on nature restoration law, an ambitious but also a necessary proposal to restore our ecosystems and nature and natural balances. And I'm truly looking forward to the fruitful exchanges we will have on this crucial piece of legislation. As you know, Council has already adopted a general approach, and I think this is an excellent landing zone on which we can base a fruitful debate. This afternoon we will also focus on another key topic. We want to advance on reducing marine litter. So we have to find practical solutions to curb plastic pollution, not only on European but also on international level too. And marine litter is an environmental disaster. Moreover, it leads to growing costs and damages to individuals, communities and societies. So something well understood in a coastal states such as Spain. And the EU is leading the way to forge an UN agreement to fight plastic pollution. The discussions on a global plastics treaty are underway, and our priority is to set legally binding obligations, measures and targets for countries along the plastics life cycle. We have also developed ambitious marine waste and product policies to prevent further accumulation of plastics in our seas and oceans. I also welcome the initiative of Vice President Ribera to put forward for the discussion interplay between the deployment of renewable energy infrastructure and the protection of biodiversity, because these two can actually go together perfectly well, both on the sea as well as on land. And in fact, renewables deployment could in many cases reinforce nature restoration and improve biodiversity. So industry, especially the offshore wind and solar industries, have illustrated well how well-designed renewables projects can bring significant benefits to biodiversity. We have examples of offshore wind installations that also offer space where fish stocks recover. So we must ensure strategic planning of renewable energy projects and prioritize sites for installations that are least in conflict with nature. So under the recently revised Renewable Energy Directive, member states will have to identify renewable acceleration areas where projects are not expected to have significant environmental impact and therefore can benefit from the simplified permitting procedures. I'll stop here. Once again, extremely happy to be here. Very beautiful place to have a press conference, and now I'm ready to take your questions on any of these points. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any question, preguntas?
Questions?
Hola, buenos días para la...
Yes, hello. This is a question for the Minister, Ms. Ribera. The Energy Charter, has there been agreement on that? What's the current situation? Did you talk about that? No, we haven't talked about it. Today, in fact, is the Council for Environment, so it doesn't relate directly to energy questions. And the Energy Charter is something which is dealt with by trade, and it's not impossible that the energy ministers might talk about it, but it's not a topic for this particular council.
Buenas tardes. Ministra, usted dijo hace unos...
Yes, good afternoon. And so you said that there was still some margin for an agreement on the nature restoration law in Parliament. Is it going to happen? Well, yes, I'd like to call on all members of the European Parliament from this platform, those who are more progressive, those who are more conservative, because it's so important to preserve nature. There's been a very important discussion on this in the Parliament, and I'd like to recall that in the Environment Council, which took place in Luxembourg scarcely a fortnight ago, there was support from the Ministers of the Environment for the proposal which had been put forward by the Commission. We consider that it's part of the roadmap to which we committed after discussions on biodiversity in Montreal. But Europe, without its ecosystems, without nature, if its ecosystems are dead, then it's not Europe. And I think after incorporating a number of amendments and exceptions, etc., that might get forward, perhaps not the highest level of guarantee in the proposal, but it might be that the European Parliament could get that through. It would, in any case, be a very bad sign if the Parliament were to reject this and get across the message that it's not worth working on preserving biodiversity, water, etc., which is so important for our societies.
Sí, una pregunta, por favor, para el comisario.
Yes, a question for Commissioner Sinkevičius, please. Could I ask whether or not, at the moment, are there any negotiations ongoing with Morocco to work on the fishing agreement? Is there any possibility of extending this? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So we are in this difficult situation as regards Morocco because of the court decision. And this, of course, complicates the situation overall. We have a constant dialogue. It's, of course, our priority to have an extension, but with the court decision currently in the loop, this kind of complicates situation. So we, of course, want to complete it as soon as possible, but first we need a clarification from the court's decision.
John Ainger, Bloomberg News. A question for Commissioner Sinkevičius. What's your assessment of how the vote is going to go in Parliament this week? And is there anything more that the Commission can do before that vote to provide assurances to lawmakers? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. So I think it's going to be tight. And it's difficult to predict. Commission will do utmost, as it always does, within its role, to talk with the policymakers, to explain the proposal. And I hope that there will be those who want to listen, who want to engage, and we're always ready to bridge the position. I think the Council general approach proved exactly that. Just before the Council's general approach, Commission issued a non-paper with a possible landing zone, which helped to reach a breakthrough. We have negotiated on very difficult files through this mandate. Fit for 55 was probably one of the most complicated ones. I don't think so that nature restoration is that complicated, to be very honest. But sometimes I just fear that we're not discussing content enough. So I truly hope that we will be able to discuss content. Tomorrow there is a debate at the Parliament where I'll be participating and presenting yet another time Commission's argument. I'm ready to, as always, to meet MEPs, answer their questions, and then we'll see how the groups will form their position. It looks like it will be a tight vote, but I hope that in the end of the day, responsibility for the future wins that.
Hello, Julien Giraud from AFP. I've got a follow-up on that for Commissioner as well. In case the Parliament rejects the text this week, is the Commission open, ready to rewrite the proposal, to propose another alternative project, or there is no time for that? Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. So just to make things clear, there will be no new proposal. If the current proposal is rejected with Council general approach, so basically member states saying that we need this legislation, we're ready to work and implement it, Commission has no time enough to propose a new proposal. We have to look at the whole Commission proposals as a sort of, one leading to another, because they cannot be taken, separately. The latest package that we proposed on soils, on NGTs, on food waste and textiles waste and so on, it all comes also together with the proposals that already proposed. Because exactly as this Council formulates, we cannot deal with such issues as biodiversity loss or climate change in silos and say that, look, biodiversity can continue to degrade, and we have an issue with food security. No, they are reinforcing each other, and we have to understand that. We have to find the measures, of course, that would not create anxiety among our farmers. But I think the biggest anxiety that is now among our farmers is the current drought that they will be facing and the decreased outputs of the yields. Only last year, with August being very dry, we lost between 5 and 10% of the output of our yields. Seems like this year situation can be even more dramatic, and it has nothing to do with the legislation, unfortunately. It has to do with the changes that are happening with our planet. So I truly look for this in-depth debate where, as I said, we need to accommodate all. That's why Commission put other proposals. Some came earlier, a year ago, the others came just now, but they are reinforcing each other. If we want to decrease the use of pesticides that pollute our soils, naturally we need to look for solutions for farmers. And I think this is where the new genomic techniques come into play and can help. But all that has to be, of course, developed, discussed, and finalized together with member states and members of the Parliament.
May I say something on that? Because I think that this is quite a new situation in the European life. along the decades, the impression was that the Commission tabled what it is at the interest of the European Union, the European society, the European commons. The Council did discuss from a national and domestic perspective, and the European Parliament was always ahead. The Council ahead the Commission. Here we are, a commissioner representing the Commission, and a member of a government being part of the Council, of the Environment Council. And what we are witnessing, and it's something that is a bit shocking, is members of the Parliament saying that they do not want to discuss a proposal, not to improve, not even to discuss a proposal that is conceived to invest in the Europeans, in the European economy and the European ecosystem. And it's something not to be believed. So let's see to what extent tomorrow you may succeed in your conversations with the members of the Parliament. But very honestly, I don't recognize some political groups of the Parliament asking for less Europe, less comfort, less security, less common goods, common interests being developed by the European institutions.
Buenos días. Confían, por un lado, en que el PP...
Hello. Yes. Are you scared that the EPP might the position, or what would be the situation there? And if on Wednesday the proposal is approved, do you think that it might be very different from what the Commission wanted?
So, as I said, if there is a rejection, it's a clear signal, and then it very much depends on the procedures. Procedures because there is a Council General approach, procedures within the Parliament. But I think if Parliament adopts position, if it's going to be very different from the proposal, I think it will be very close to Council General approach, because we see from amendments, by the way, even the largest EPP group, they registered 26 amendments. So I think those amendments, they are not going too far away from Council proposal. They, at some point, deleting some parts as 10% milestone, but for example going further on possibilities of financing. So I think it gives, if it's adopted, gives good opportunity, as I understand from the Spanish presidency, to begin trilogues as soon as possible and conclude them as early as possible. Because let's not forget that this is not only domestic debate, it's a global debate. And I'm just returning this morning from Colombia, where I attended the pre-summit on Amazon. And of course, our deforestation legislation, which is very much linked to biodiversity, affects countries of Amazon. But they also look at our commitments domestically, commitments that we managed to export into global biodiversity framework agreement, which we have adopted and reached the deal at COP15. And if we not manage to walk the talk, but only be ambitious internationally, but domestically we not manage to follow, this also puts a great shadow on our credibility. I hope we also encounter that.
Yo creo honestamente que
Well, to be perfectly honest, I think a negative vote, voting no because I don't like there to be problems, doesn't solve the problem in itself. So I would say that in line with what the Commission has just said, it is important. It is important to understand what's happening with the ecosystem. The ecosystem could break down, could take a break because it's not being properly managed. There's no point in Europe trying to say they're tackling climate and environmental issues, which are important issues in terms of security and prosperity. And there's no point in doing that if we don't think in terms of societies and human life across the planet. There's no point in us saying that if we're not able to have a discussion about these issues, because what we've seen is an approach where people are just rejecting things. So we very much hope that things will be resolved in a reasonable way. One final question, please.
Es un tema de actualidad política al margen de...
It's a topical political point. So we do have what are you expecting about the head-to-head debate tonight? Well, I'm not able to answer this question, particularly with the background of the European Union presidency. But I think it will be interesting, and for anyone who has to manage institutional responsibilities. Thank you very much.